Arteta, out! No! You get me? Get the fuck out of the club!
You tell me trust this fucking shit, blood. Are you fucking mad, fam? Me trust this, blood. Are you crazy? I don't trust this process. I will never trust this process, blood. I can't trust this Robbie, blood. I will never trust this shit. On my life, I will never trust this, blood.
Mikel, fuck off. See you later. You're not good enough. Right, that's it. He's not good enough. I'm not being horrible. He's a nice enough bloke. He's a lovely fella. Everything like that. He is not good enough to be manager of Arsenal Football Club.
A big football club should have an elite manager. This is one of the biggest clubs in the world. Mikel Arteta's tried his best. I'm not going to diss him. He's right for taking the job. Who wouldn't take the opportunity? But he's out of his depth.
Arsenal are top of the world with a young, brilliant coach in Mikel Arteta, having the most valuable squad in the entire world, and for the first time in 10 years, Arsenal feel like they're that big club that they were always supposed to be. But getting to this point hasn't been sunshines and rainbows. It's been years of hard work and building the foundations to get to this point. In this breakdown, we will be looking at the timeline of Mikel Arteta's career and how he's changed the perspective of the culture around Arsenal. Arsenal was in a weird transition period in their club's history. After 22 long years, Arsene Wenger decided to retire, which was received with mixed reviews. Some were sad to see the legend of their club leave, and some were extremely happy to see him go. Nonetheless, Arsenal had to find a new manager, and that's where Unai Emery came.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Emery was appointed as head coach in 2018. He finished Europa League's runners-up in his first season before being sacked in November 2019 after strings of poor performances. Emery's time at the Emirates had some good moments, for example the huge North London derby win and the introduction of Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli, but some had bad moments like losing the Europa League final against your city rivals or a poor run of games at the end of the season that made Arsenal miss the top four. On December 20th, 2019, Mikel Arteta was appointed head coach at Arsenal. This appointment had mixed reviews around the Arsenal fanbase, with some happy just to have a fresh start, while others thought Arteta was too unexperienced to manage a big club like Arsenal, as this was his first ever gig in the dugout. Even though Arteta was a beginner, there was something special about him. In Arteta's first ever press conference, he's quoted, "Arsenal has lost their way and that anyone who does not buy into his plans to change the club culture will have no plans in his regime." At the time, Arsenal's reputation was a club with no real structure and no real serious ambition to compete. From the back looking in, it looked like players were able to do whatever they pleased without any real consequences. Arteta's debut in the dugout was against Bournemouth, which ended in a 1-1 draw. Despite the draw, he stated that he was pleased with the attitude, passion, and fighting spirits of his players. Attitude, passion, and fighting spirit was something Mikel Arteta would highlight a lot for Arsenal. That was the bare minimum for him. On January 1st, 2020, Arteta got his first ever win coaching Arsenal, a 2-0 win over Manchester United at the Emirates. The season was paused because of COVID-19, but when football came back, Arsenal did extremely well in the FA Cup competition. In the FA Cup semi-finals, Arteta beat his old club Manchester City 2-0. Arteta became the first ever player to win the FA Cup as a captain and a coach at Arsenal, when Arsenal went on to defeat Chelsea 2-1 in the final for a record 14th success, followed by winning the Community Shield against the champions on penalties. Arteta's position formally moved from head coach to manager on September 10th to reflect a new large responsibility at the club. Everything was looking bright for Arsenal. 2 trophies in the bag, their gunman Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang signing a long-term contract, but the following season would be the worst for Arsenal in the Premier League era. This season was awful for Arsenal. They went on a terrible run of games where a whole month they didn't win. At one point in the season, they were 15th place. They were a couple points away from relegation. This is where the movement Arteta out took a storm through social media, always trending after games on Twitter. This was a bad time for Arteta and Arsenal. The football they were playing was stagnant, no real attacking threat, as well as leaking easy goals. Looking at this record right here, it seems Arteta was destined to get sacked, but I believe a big reason for Arsenal not pulling the plug on him was the fact that there was no fans in the stadium. If the fans were in the stadiums during this bad run of form Arteta was in, they would definitely make it clear and obvious to the board that they were upset towards the team. Look at the situation with Chelsea and Graham Potter. Chelsea said they were going to give him time and they were planning to keep him at the end of the season, but their fans made it obvious that they were unhappy after every game, booing at full time. Once the fans turns on you, it's only a ticking time bomb for your job. Arsenal ended up losing to Villarreal in the semi-finals with a pathetic display of football. Rubbing more salt in the wound, the manager they sacked was the team to kill off the Europa League dream. Arsenal ended up coming 8th place, which means no European competition for the first time in 20 years. Arteta was under massive pressure for the following season, with some fans baffled that he was still even in charge. Following that horrendous season, Arteta spent upwards to $150 million on new signings that were Aaron Ramsdale, Ben White, Martin Odegaard, Tomiyasu, and many more, which turned out to be a huge success, and they are huge players for Arsenal, but at the time many of those signings were questionable. Aaron Ramsdale, a goalkeeper who's been relegated back-to-back years, Ben White, price tag that just looked ridiculous at the time, and many people laughed at Martin Odegaard as a failed wonder kid, with James Maddison being the more exciting option. The season didn't start well for Arsenal, losing the first game to newly promoted Brentford 2-0, then losing to Chelsea, their London rivals 2-0 at home, then getting killed by Manchester City 5-0 away. Starting the season 0-3, Arsenal dropped to 20th, sitting at the bottom of the table. Arsenal ended up getting some results, which boosted up their confidence before the big North London derby. Arsenal demolished Tottenham 3-1, where they scored 3 goals in 34 minutes. After guiding Arsenal to win all 3 matches in the Premier League, Mikel Arteta was named Premier League Manager of the Month. During the season, Arsenal was flying, doing quite well for themselves, landing in the 4th position for large portions of the season, but when the month of April came around, it was rocky for the Gunners. A 3-0 loss to Crystal Palace, then losing to Brighton at home, and losing to Southampton. In a matter of a couple games, top 4 looked like it was slipping away. But on April 20th, Hale End took over Stamford Bridge, beating Chelsea 4-2 away from home with 2 goals from Eddie Nketiah, a goal from Emile Smith-Rowe, and a penalty from Saka, giving Arsenal a chance back at top 4. The following game, they beat Manchester United at home, and then won 2 games on the spin. Now they have a chance to beat their rivals at their own ground to qualify for the Champions League, the biggest moment possible. They lost 3-0, but it's all good. Just beat Newcastle and Champions League is here. They lost 2-0. It was all over. The dream of Champions League football was dead. The season filled with highs and lows, ended up in a big low. Having missing out on Champions League football, Arteta decided to sign some reinforcements, with the likes of Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko joining this Arsenal side. In the start of the season, Arsenal was flawless, winning 5 out of 5 games, having them top of the league, and at the halfway point of the season, they were 50 points in 19 games. Arteta had this young Arsenal side playing some of the best football in Europe. Arsenal was fast, sharp, intelligent, and deadly. If you told anyone in the world that Arsenal would be this good, they would have called you crazy. They were 8 points clear of Manchester City with a game played. Arsenal was looking great, but that's when the collapse happened. Injuries, inexperience, and a bald man named Pep ruined Arsenal's dream of bringing the Premier League back to North London. Overall, that season has been a success for Arsenal. After years of no Champions League football, Arteta and the players had shown that they are able to compete with the youngest squad in the league. This summer, they decided to let the whole world know that they're here to stay, signing Declan Rice for over 100 million, signing Kai Havertz, David Raya, and Timber. This season, they started with the win over Manchester City, the team that broke their Premier League dreams in the Community Shield. Arteta has this Arsenal team that used to look hopeless into a real competitive side that is trying to compete for every trophy possible. But the real question is, how? One notable change that Arteta has brought to Arsenal is defining and adapting playing styles. Arteta emphasizes possession-based football, high pressing, and structured defensive organization. The team's game plan now revolves around patient build-up from the back, controlling possession, and quick transitions. Probably the biggest thing Arteta has changed at Arsenal is the culture around the football club. Arsenal was lost. The fans and the club weren't on the same page. Arteta has turned this club into a family, from the players to the fans. Arteta has done a lot at the training ground. For example, having positive messages around the training facilities. Having spontaneous team lunches has become a way to make foreign players feel at home. Players were allowed to bring their families on the recent trip to Dubai during the Premier League winter break. Arteta has killed out the cliques at Arsenal and created a family feel. Recently, Mikel Arteta has brought in a dog called Win, who brings that positive energy around the club. Having the North London Forever song played before every game at the Emirates, a song that describes life in North London. This song brings the fans together before every game. Overall, he's changed the love and culture at Arsenal. Now he's also changed the attitude at the club. Arsenal used to be a team with players that were able to do whatever they want, whenever they wanted. Mikel Arteta came to Arsenal with a list of non-negotiables. This has forced him to kick some people out the club, with the likes of Mesut Ozil, Guendouzi, and his own captain. The captain, Arsenal's superstar, the man who single-handedly won him the FA Cup. He kicked them out the club. It was a big call, but Arteta knew the squad had to move forward, especially for the young boys. This was a call to make. With Arteta, attitude is the most important quality he looks in players. An underrated aspect of Arteta's time at Arsenal is his ability to develop players. Mikel Arteta has turned players into real superstars. Bukayo Saka is one of the best wingers in the world. Martinelli is one of the most exciting wingers in the world. The way he was able to save Granit Xhaka's career at Arsenal, he turned him from the most hated to the most loved player at the Emirates. The way he turned Martin Odegaard from a failed wonder kid to one of the most attacking midfielders in Europe, loaning out William Saliba multiple times for game time until he was ready. The list can go on and on. His ability to develop players is a tremendous attribute he has. Mikel Arteta's belief in nurturing young talent not only strengthens Arsenal in the long run, but also reshapes the culture by promoting a sense of security and pride among players and fans alike. The groundwork that Mikel Arteta has done for this club has been tremendous. From looking out of his depth to one of the best managers in the league, Mikel Arteta is the perfect example of what a rebuild should look like. Build on youth, spend wisely, and change the culture around the club.